Alright guys, how's it going? Let me start this video by apologising for my voice. I've had a problem with my throat again, which over the weekend developed into a cold. So for a change, I decided to take it easy over the weekend and do something that I haven't done in a very long time, and something that I don't do enough of these days in fact, and that was play a game. And that game is Prey. It's been 4 years in development, developed by Arcane Studios and published by Bethesda. Interestingly, it does appear to be the first game where we see the collaboration between Bethesda and AMD. So that should be interesting from a benchmarking perspective. Rather than simply benchmark the game though, I've decided to do a mini review. So this should be something a little bit different from what you normally see. Now my job here is to tell you about the game without giving too much away, because Prey is very much a game about solving a mystery. A mystery taking place aboard a research space station called Talos 1. And very quickly it becomes apparent that not everything is as it seems. Whether that was down to the Half-Life facehugger moment, or the fact that the station appears deserted, save for a few mutilated dead bodies lying around, or your first encounter with the game enemies, which are able to cunningly disguise themselves as anything nearby. And all these elements together very quickly give a sense of foreboding, if not mild terror, in the early part of the game. Now before I continue with this, let me just say that I do not like horror games. I don't like horror movies either. I dislike anything that gives you jump scares or playing games that fill you with sheer terror. I have a hard enough time sleeping without having that crap on my mind. So Prey was actually a game that I was going to give a miss. I also know there's quite a few of you like that, so you may be wondering if Prey is for you. It's been likened to other games like BioShock and even the System Shock games, and takes elements from other games like, for example, Deus Ex. And while there is an early sense of urgency and foreboding, especially due to the nature of the early mimic aliens you meet, you soon start relaxing a bit as you realise that these mimics are meat for your wrench or any of the myriad of weapons you find throughout the game. It's very cleverly done in that absolutely anything in the game could give you a little scare, and it does keep you on edge. In actual fact, it really adds to the game enjoyment. Now I mentioned the similarities to Deus Ex, and the main reason for this, and what is possibly Prey's biggest strength, is the multiple methods of getting the job done. Throughout the game you will come across many terminals which need to be hacked, or you maybe find the password instead. You might come across a door that you can't open, but looking hard enough you'll probably find a hatch or an alternative method around. These choices are up to you. The game's progression system is based around neuromods, which in a basic sense act as skill points. You run across a bunch of these neuromods at various stages of the game, and each one allows you to customise your character in areas, for example, like hacking passwords, or lifting heavier objects, or simply just letting you sneak around better. Again, it's pretty similar to the Deus Ex type of game, but that's no bad thing. Another major strength of the game is the weapons. You've got all the usual stuff like your silenced pistol and your shotgun, with which I've yet to meet a problem that can't be solved, but also other far more interesting weapons like the glue gun, the most obvious use of which is slowing down and freezing your enemies before beating them over the head with your wrench. But the glue gun is also more than that, as they can fix leaky pipes and stop you from being zapped by faulty electrical equipment, which you can then of course choose to repair, so long as you've taken the neuro mod to do so. So all this ties together to create a game which is very replayable. You may find yourself constantly backtracking, checking doors that couldn't be opened previously, and then discovering a whole new area which you would not have seen had you taken different choices. So that certainly helps with the game's replayability, and in fact I felt myself constantly wanting to go back and see what I missed. It's a real strength of the game. Much of the game's difficulty is down to running out of ammunition on your favourite weapon, but Prey utilises a very clever method of replenishing your stock and crafting even more useful equipment. Throughout each level are various recyclers, where you can stuff all that trash you've been picking up, you were picking that up for a reason after all, or throw in some duplicates of weapons you may have found, and hitting the recycle button turns all of it into useful materials, for example organic and mineral materials. You then need to find a fabrication station, which allows you to turn the raw material back into something useful. It's a pretty smart part of the game. There is also a recycling charge, which when thrown creates a vortex which grabs everything in the immediate area and turns it into raw materials. And yes, like most things in the game, it can be used as a weapon too. Fact which I discovered by pure accident during the following passage of play. Let me just explain to you what happened here. So here I was looking for a way upstairs to no avail, but then I noticed a couple of crates over to the right hand side. Jumping up on them took me upstairs, where I noticed one of the game's aliens. These aliens are much tougher than the mimics you meet early on, And I've been playing a stealthy character, so like a true hero I decided to stealthily sneak up behind it and unload my shotgun in its back. Like I said, there's no problem the shotgun can't fix, so long as it's got the ammunition available, which to my dismay I no longer had. At this point I decide to hastily switch to the glue gun before the alien truly spots me, and in typical panic mode fashion I start hastily bashing every button on my action bar to find my next weapon. What do I find? A recycler charge, which in my panic I throw right at the phantom and discover that it actually works. And not only does it work, it gives me exotic materials, which can be used for more exotic upgrades. Little things like that just really make the game. And the game is full of them. Single aliens by themselves are not that difficult, but at some parts of the game you'll come across much stronger enemies. If the shotgun is unable to solve two problems, you can always dig around for turrets. You can even carry them halfway around the station if you like, in order to set up an ambush for the tougher fights. There is a constant feeling that the game will help you through it, so long as you use all the tools that are available. It's much more than simply running around blasting aliens and opening doors though. Reading emails gives you hints as to what to do next, and you can also find blueprints for plans for new weapons, and even equipment for spacewalks. Be careful though, because there are aliens out there as well, and it's a lot harder to manoeuvre in zero gravity. Without trying to give too much away, later on in the game you acquire equipment that allows you to scan the aliens and then use the neuromods to develop their powers. And yes, if you want, you can turn yourself into a mimic, something that I have yet to try, but I am sure will lead to even more interesting combinations and ways around the station. But that is the game in a nutshell, and before I get to my summary, we'll take a quick look at the benchmarks I've been doing on various systems over the past couple of days. Now you may have seen some early benchmarks of Prey where Nvidia was well ahead. This however was based on a problematic driver, and many Nvidia users had stuttering and issues with the shadows displaying properly in the game, which is probably why the frame rate was higher on Nvidia cards at launch. About a week later though, they hotfixed this with a driver 382.19, which I am of course using in these benchmarks. I'm running two systems here, an R5-1600X and an i5-7600K. Everything there should be pretty self-explanatory, except perhaps for graphics card 3, which is my Palette GTX 1060, which I have overclocked the memory up to the 2017 standard speed of 9GB per second. Right, so I've decided to benchmark three different areas of the game. The first area was the Arboretum, which is a very nice looking outdoor area indoors. And instantly we can see that there is very, very little between the graphics cards and the CPUs. The 7600K is between 1 and 2% faster than the 1600X, depending on which graphics card is used, and the GTX 1060 is between 1 and 2% faster than the RX 580 in this part of the game. If you're looking at the colours and thinking, why on earth did I choose these? It actually makes sense if you think about it. Right, so next up was the hardware labs. Once again, the 7600K and GTX 1060 at the top. This time around, the GTX 1060 has around a 4% lead over the RX 580, with again only around a 1% lead for the 7600K over the 1600X. Tested area was Psychotronics. A lot of this benchmark sequence takes place in a tunnel, so it's pretty short draw distances and a high frame rate. You generally notice that Nvidia and Intel do better in these kind of benchmarks, and this one is no exception, with the GTX 1060 around 6% faster than the RX 580. But again, the 7600K is only around 1% faster than the 1600X. I wasn't really happy with the CPU results though, as it does look a bit like a graphics bottleneck. So I decided to throw in my MSI GTX 1070 Gaming X, which is overclocked to around 2 GHz. And running through the Arboretum, we can see that the 7600K does indeed pull away from the 1600X using the faster graphics card. And judging by what we saw with the 1060 and 580, we should reasonably expect to see the same thing happen in the other benchmarks as well. But in actual fact, that's not what happened, as once I got to the hardware labs, the 1600X actually pulled away from the 7600K. This is one of the reasons why I decided to benchmark different areas of the game. Very interesting to see that in some areas the 7600K was faster, and yet in others the 1600X was faster. And I actually went back and retested both systems this morning to check that these results were legitimate, and they were. And finally in Psychotronics, the 7600K pulls a little bit away again. With both systems over 150 frames per second, it's all pretty academic. So that's the benchmarks. There's absolutely no difference in gameplay between any of the systems. It's a good looking game and extremely well optimised. You should get over 60 frames per second with just about any modern graphics card. Right, so to finish this one up, I've already put 20 plus hours into the game, by which stage I reckon I'm well past halfway, but at no point did the game ever feel like it was getting bogged down or boring me. I obviously don't do an awful lot of game reviews, but I actually felt compelled to do this one, because it's been a long time since I've sat down and played and enjoyed a game as thoroughly as what I have enjoyed Prey. And it came as a big surprise to me because I really didn't expect to enjoy this game half as much as what I have. So if you've been looking at Prey and been sitting on the fence wondering if it's for you, then what you've seen in this video has probably already convinced you. For me, this is a surprise game of the year so far, and is unquestionably well worth checking out. If you are going to buy it, check out one or two links below where you can pick it up an awful lot cheaper. Right, so I'm done here. I'll be taking a closer look at some more tech videos really soon. I'll catch you later, guys.